Hello, welcome everyone to another Change Your Game with GTD podcast. My name is Robert Peake. I'm here with Todd Brown.
Hello, everyone.
Hey, Todd. So the purpose of this podcast series is to help you understand how you can reduce friction in your work and life, reduce stress by getting the right kind of things done moment to moment. And that accumulates into achieving the things you want to achieve, having a sense of accomplishment, and all the good stuff in life that goes with knowing you can hit your goals effectively. So people sometimes think those things are a bit at odds. They sometimes think that in order to achieve more, you actually have to admit more stress into your life. You actually have to power through friction-filled situations, and through sort of sheer force of will and amount of time, spent behind a computer screen or wherever it is you work and live. Just sort of get through it that way, that stress and success are kind of married or a one-to-one correlation. And our point of view, having practiced and coached and taught seminars on this particular methodology called Getting Things Done, or GTD, is that actually the revelation is there's a smarter way to do it. There's a smarter way to do it. There's a better way to do it. And through this comprehensive set of best practices and through working with them across an incredibly wide range of not only industries, but types of individuals and the ways that their minds work, we found that these are some pretty universal principles. So that said, we have a request come in from someone named David, incidentally, not the David who invented the methodology, but one of our listeners saying, when I talk to people about GTD, the results or the artifacts of it, the things like calendar or lists or whatever, that are the results of implementing these best practices and the ways of doing that. Often people are repelled by that because they feel like it's too structured. It's too organized. It's going to maybe squelch their creativity, their spark, or it's going to be just too much for them or something they're not able to do or whatever. So the sort of question, I guess, is GTD too structured? And if not, how do you communicate that to other people? How do you communicate more of the essence of it being a way to actually create more freedom and less stress in your life? Todd, do you want to kick off? We were talking beforehand about this is a topic that comes up kind of from time to time. Why do you think that is? Why do you think people have this perception, and what have you found that helps in helping them have a more accurate perception, I guess?
Yeah, I think that part of the issue. Yeah, you're right. First off, you're absolutely right. Some people do have a reaction to the things that we recommend in GTD, which is, oh, that's not me. That's just way too much structure. That's way too much, being a person that I'm not. And I think that's a really interesting, I think the misperception comes from what people think we want them to do differently. And this is where I suppose the reassuring idea from Getting Things Done is that when it comes to the methodology, there are lots of suggestions about best practices, right? Loads. And we can get very detailed, and we can get into the tech, and we can get into the, how does this all work together, and how would you think about your work differently? But the number of things which are sort of required, as it were, or things where we say, hey, you got to do this, that's a very small list of things, right? And so I think what a lot of people are doing when they say this is not me is that they're reacting to whatever they've seen by way of somebody, showing their system, or, showing what it is that they do to make their day as productive and as friction-free as possible, as you said. And they look at that and they go, well, that's not me. There's no way that I could do that. And again, I think one of the reasons that Getting Things Done has been so successful for so many years is that, and this is a point that we've made in previous podcast episodes, it has space for you, right? It has space for your preferences, for your tool set, for the ways that you like to work, right? So it's not like we're selling, forms that you need to fill out, and you need to fill out all of the forms exactly the same way as everybody else on the planet is filling out the forms, whether they're digital or paper. No, that's not what we're asking. We're asking you to think about how would you work in ways that would, yes, absolutely lower your stress levels and increase your productivity. As I say, that's not the same for everybody. I'll just say one more thing, and I'd be curious to know your thoughts on this. But quite often, when I'm, one of my roles in the business, some of the folks listening in will know this, but I'm what's called a master trainer. So I train people to be trainers, right? And one of the things that I find with a lot of people who are going through the certification process is they get really enthused about showing their own system, right? They almost want to do that straight away. Oh, let me just show everybody my system. And I say to them, you need to be really careful about showing somebody your system. I'm not saying it's a never, don't you ever do that, but it can be really off-putting, right, to somebody who looks at your system, which you know and you love, and you've developed over the years, and you've refined and all of that. But somebody else might look at it and go, what in the world? No way. That's not me. So again, I think that's maybe another reason that we run into this, objection, if you want to call it an objection, is because people, forget about people going through certification. People who get enthused about GTD, right? They might just say to their, colleague, friend, partner, whatever, hey, let me show you what I've done, right? And that is maybe not the right place to start if you're really interested in having that person, get enthused about GTD. The place really to start, I would recommend, would be more about, what does this enable? What does this really look like in terms of the advantages that it brings to my life? Don't focus on the structure. Don't focus on the system. Don't focus on the tech straight away. Just focus on, hey, how has my life changed in terms of, what I can get done and how I get it done.
Yeah.
So there you go. That's a
Yeah.
little bit longer riff than I sort of imagined it might be, but interested in your thoughts.
Yeah, no, that's a great riff, I would say, and a lot to dig into there. As I was listening to you talking, I was really thinking about how sort of no two brains are alike, right? And increasingly, that's something that I've really discovered in decade or more of coaching individuals. And so, absolutely, when you say, someone with all this enthusiasm says, "Here's my system," people look at the particulars and go, "Well, that's not quite right for me." And I think, our formative years are spent in an educational system that's really right for some people, but is enthusiastically applied and rigorously applied to everyone. So if people have had experiences, and then in a lot of corporate environments, the training, the approach, the structures, whatever, if people have had the experience of, wow, all of this external structure isn't for me because it doesn't really suit the way that I work best, it's not the ideal environment for me, then obviously one more thing that looks like external imposed structure, you're going to have this very much an allergic reaction. And yet the irony is GTD helps those individuals who have a unique way of doing things tremendously. It's actually often those individuals that really catch the spark and understand, once they understand the principles, how incredibly valuable this will be for them, because the stock standard, sit down and write a list approach isn't the best way for them in terms of the way their mind works. They need to go out for a walk with a tape recorder and unload a bunch of ideas, and they're going to unload some better ideas than the person maybe writing the structured list that has really tight parameters on it. But then they need a way to clarify that. Then they need a way to organize that. Then they need a way to bring that back to them so that they can actually, work with that effectively. And the principles are incredibly adaptable to a wide range of people. So I think you're absolutely right. People are looking at outputs and going, "Oh my gosh, I've had systems and frameworks imposed on me all my life, some of which were great, some of which weren't. this is what works for one person's brain, and they're very enthusiastic about it, and I need to push back basically because my brain isn't an exact match of theirs. No two are anyway. So one of the things I found useful to get in under that identity level conversation of are you a structured person or not or whatever is to point out that um, all of us, just about everybody in adult life, has some externalization and some ritual with that that helps them. And the foundational one is a calendar. You know, that just everybody at some point, you know, after uni has learned that you can't just remember that there's a party on Thursday and you need to do laundry on Sunday and that's it for the week. Like you got to have an external calendar. You got to be consulting that. You got to be referencing that if you want to show up at the right time for the right things, ideally prepared to actually do those things as well, right? With your swim trunks when it's time to go to the pool. And so just saying, look, GTD handles all the stuff that's not time specific in a way that lets your mind relax, I think is one of the, you know, quickest elevator pitches kind of that I found that people can go, oh, okay, well, that sounds interesting. Because, yeah, I do trust my calendar. I would, you know, get in a fight with you if you wanted to try and erase it off of all my devices. You know, that wouldn't be good. I'd be missing stuff that's really important. I think it wouldn't be great to not miss the stuff that's really important that you don't absolutely have a set time for, but also not be faking it on your calendar that you're supposed to do so and so at 9 a.m. because 9 a.m. shows around, you don't feel like it, there's an interruption, whatever. Calendar's not appropriate for that. So I think there are some ways to look at the physical manifestations of what we're all doing and extrapolate from there. So they have at least some idea of, oh yeah, this isn't totally foreign. But it's so important, I think, to guard against the one size fits all. And so many methodologies are one size fits all. They are something, you know, that works for a certain type of team, a certain group, a certain individual. We've seen this with things like Agile being imposed on, you know, big corporations that aren't startups, that aren't looking for, you know, iterating as fast as possible and would have done much better with waterfalls and Gantt charts and other things, right? We've seen the zealous imposition of things that work for some people and others really backfire. And so that's where, you know, that's where my mind goes hearing you talk about, you know, how important it is to understand the spirit of it is actually very much about accommodating the individual.
I couldn't agree more. And I think what you've taken me back to is when I first got started in this work all those many decades ago now, one of the things that I remember from an interview with David Allen was exactly the example you just quoted about, if you think if you think what we're recommending is too much structure, then throw away your calendar, right? That was more or less a direct quote of David's. And I think that's a great little thought experiment, right? For anybody to do who's thinking, well, I'm not quite sure this is for me. Just imagine what your life would be like if you did not, and you were not allowed to, whatever, keep a calendar, right? And just think what that would mean in terms of your ability to meet the commitments that you have in your life, right? To yourself, to your colleagues, to your family. And so once you get that, that can be maybe the foundational idea. Okay, well, I do need something by way of externalizing the commitments that I've got and my calendar. And of course, this is one of the reasons that for a lot of people, the calendar gets abused, right? The calendar, because as you say, pretty much everybody's got one, right? And so what they do is they say, okay, well, since this is in essence my trusted system, right? Everything goes in there, right? So they block time for things that are going to take 32 seconds. That gets a half an hour block in the calendar. It's put in at a time where they'd say to themselves, when the time actually shows up, when that time arrives, they go, man, not really going to do that now. So then they're dragging things around and they're rescheduling and that sort of thing. So one of the things that we do in GTD, as you implied, is sort of say, hey, the calendar is great for some things and it's not for other things. And let's talk about for the things other than the time-specific things, how you would best handle them. So again, I just can't, when I think about the people over the many, many years that you and I have both been doing this work, the people that I've run into, that have been, there's an incredibly broad spectrum, right? I can think of clients who've been um, really like absolutely, they were on point with all of the best practices, and they were, and you could sort of, go through their system and just sort of go, okay, well, if somebody was going to implement all of the best practices and all of these things in a very structured way, here's what it would look like, right? I have absolutely worked with those people. But at the other end of that spectrum, I've had people who've said, you know what I did? I got my calendar under control, so I've got the right reminders there. I've got a waiting for list, which I absolutely love, and make sure that I have, that it keeps track of the things that I'm waiting for other people to do for me. And I've got a list of next actions, which is maybe it's not even organized by context, as we say in the business. It's not even organized by location or person or tool. But this has just changed my life, right? And then they just go, well, that's it. That seems to be what I need. And what's interesting, I'm just taken back to a coaching I did. This was a few years ago now, but I showed up. I showed up with it was a flight to get there. I showed up in this person's office at someone that I had coached before, and I went into his office, and he was just bouncing off the walls. He was so excited. He was like, this is so great. This has made such a positive difference in my life. And thank you so much. And what a great thing you've sort of brought to me and to us. And, so I was like, this is great. How can I help? And what would you like to focus on today? And he opened up his system, and it was a dog's dinner. I mean, it was just, in terms of best practice, it was like very few things that we would sort of go, yeah, that's clean, that has clean edges, that's the kind of thing that we're looking for. But compared to what he had been doing, right, it was a huge upgrade, right? So he had, I guess, if you think about it in big picture terms, he was ticking the one box that we say, this one box should always be ticked, and that is, don't keep things in your head, right? Now, beyond that, he had not done a great job of sort of organizing the results of that in a way that really supported him, and in terms of keeping him undistracted and stress free. But that was part of his journey, and that comes to mind for me as well. Is that people who, I think the people, and I would include myself in this. Some of the people who've gotten a lot of the methodology over the years have brought with them this attitude that, okay, well, this is my system for now, but I'm open to the possibility that next week, next month, next year, this may change, and I may implement it in a different way.
Yeah, absolutely. That adaptability. And I too have had that experience of looking at someone else's system and going, okay. The phrase dog's dinner stood out to me because I would think I was saying beforehand, our dog has had some teeth out, and we're giving her a special dinner. And this morning I served her well, breakfast, I guess, not dinner, and it was smelly. It was not my thing, but I put it down there, and she just yummed it up. She just thought it was the best thing ever, And I had to go and give myself a moment before I poured out my own muesli, because I was still reeling from the smell of it. So it's just amazing how what's absolutely delicious, to one person will be odious, to another. And to be fair, when we give her the upgrade, when we every once in a while she gets a little bit of our roast dinner or whatever, she goes, oh, this is this is a whole nother level of culinary experience. So that's not to say there isn't, improvement opportunities, but also one person's dog's dinner is another person's gourmet feast too, in terms of how their mind works and in terms of how they relate to, what's externalized and what it means to them, and how it works. And I think too, we sometimes lose sight of the higher horizons, the fact that things like areas of focus, and being able to externalize those and being able to see how the different parts of your life interrelate, and then go into creating the desired outcomes for that and the next steps and executing on that is another way in, that a lot of people find incredibly helpful. And doesn't look like a very structured or rigid thing at all. It looks like a big, scattered, wonderful mind map that you can sort of range around and roam around in, to understand your life a bit better. So there's a lot of elements of, I think, of the GTD practice that can apply to different people in different ways and different styles that they use to live their life. The final thing I was just kind of reflecting on as you were talking, as we were talking about this idea of identity and I'm not a that kind of person, is I think some people equate mess with sort of, creative fertility in a way, like that having a kind of messy environment or messy life or whatever is fodder for, being creative. And others too, I think, in order to either be creative or be ambitious in any way and work as well as doing sort of creative pursuits, um, kind of get a sense of a kind of monomania about the one thing they're doing and sort of letting all else fall by the wayside, if you like. And what's funny is GTD doesn't say you have to be clean and neat and tidy, right? I mean, if that's working for you, that's working fine for you. You don't have to use GTD to have work-life balance if you don't want that. If you just want to, go after that one great thing that's really the burning desire for you, GTD will help you structure that and really do that well. But also, the reality is most people find that the clutter, that the residual stuff distracts from their ability to really focus on the thing that's most important to them as well. And so it's a bit of a rationalization, frankly, I find with a lot of people, that this idea that, oh, well, I like it like this, or it helps me, fuel the one thing I'm passionate about. The reality I've found is when you strip away that stuff that's getting in the way of your passion, you actually are able to go faster and further and to focus on it more guilt-free, right? That you're not just having to push the world aside. The world is stable. The world is okay with you just really focusing on what you want to focus on. So I think that's, some people will get that and some won't. Ultimately, some people will be really invested in I'm the nutty professor trope, and that's how I am, and that's what makes me, good at what I do. And others will get that actually, with a quieter environment comes a more focused mind and an ability to actually do the professorial things a bit better. So
Yeah, do you know, it's funny as you're describing that, I'm just thinking back about the number of people over the years that I've dealt with who have been in what we would call the creative industries, right?
hmm yeah,
Musicians,
yeah,
artists, folk, people who are from the theater world, right? And what's I think one of the common threads that those folks have brought to the work is this idea that, to your point, it's not about it's not about being tidy or being organized
mm,
somehow, but what they want to do is they want to one I'm thinking about one person that I worked with who's a very very successful musician in the jazz world, and he was telling me that when he jazz, and those of you who heard the podcast from time to time might know this, but I'm a very keen jazz musician myself, but I'm not a professional. But my one of the things that he said to me was, look, when I'm getting ready to play a solo, right, and solos are all about improvisation. He said the last thing I want to be worried about is whether I need to buy milk. Right? He said I want a clear head. I make sure that in that moment, I'm able to focus 100% on what's going on in the music with the other musicians, what's coming next, right? Just allow myself to really be 100% focused on that. And DTD helps me to do that.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
yeah, I mean, I think, so to your point, we're not recommending that people are sort of rigid in their ways of working in a sense,
Mm.
but the important thing is to use the best practices that we talk about to create that sense of mental clarity and that lack of distraction that can get in the way of not just getting the right things done, but enjoying it.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's amazing how much it really actually is a quality of life kind of thing. And
Mm.
I wish I could just say to people, as you said, think about a really high quality experience you had. You're in the zone, you're doing that great jazz improvisation, whatever it is. Want more of that? Let's find the GTD principles that help you get more of that and more of that and more of that, over time. But not everyone, kind of. I guess, realizes that there's some universal principles to that don't have to be universally or rigidly applied. So we still have work to do, Todd. We still have work to do
Yeah.
to get that message out to help people have a taste of that experience. Um, and those of you out there who have gotten it have work to do as well. So, top tips for those who are wanting to spread the good GTD word without, causing people to cringe or break out in hives. What would you say if you're counseling someone who really gets it, really loves it, really wants to help? Um, what should they be doing and not doing?
Yeah. So again, I think top tip number one: don't crack open your system and start to give a demo. What I would say though is focus on what GTD enables,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
that'll probably be some combination of here's what it allows me to get done, right, and here's how I can have the confidence that I'm focused on the right stuff, and um, here's how it allows me to keep a clear head,
Hmm.
right? To
Hmm.
focus at any given moment on whatever it is that I choose to focus on without any, as we use, this phrase that we use quite often, without any mental residue,
Hmm.
right? Other things that that come to mind that are distracting in that moment and are not really terribly helpful. So those would be my top tips. How about you?
Mm. No, those are great. Those are really great. And I agree about don't open your system and say this is GTD because that's really the artifacts, not the spirit. And so to me, the spirit of the thing is really, um, something around the quality in your life, the quality that comes with also getting the things done that you want to get done. So for me, being curious, like, so what are you doing to kind of have a better life? What do you do that helps you? What are your rituals or things that, in your life that make your life have more quality to them? And what do you want? What's kind of the deeper cut? If it's not about productivity, it's about really having those quality experiences. What would you do with more headspace? What would you do, with more quality of attention? What would you do if you really knew that there was a better way to do what you're doing that was less stressful, that was more purposeful, that you could end the day really feeling like, yeah, I got a lot of the right stuff done. I'm on my way to even better things. What would you do with that? And so that curiosity, that opening up, the spirit of the thing, I think really helps people kind of understand the intent rather than the manifestation, which has to be unique. So thank you, Todd. Great conversation as always. Really, really fun to riff on this stuff, and it reminds me too of why we do this, right? The real heart of the matter. So if this sparked interest in any of you out there listening, first of all, thanks to David B for kicking this one our way, this conundrum, and hopefully that's helpful for you in having some ways that you can approach colleagues who are resistant to a lot of structure and help them get that GTD is about a lot more than that. If we can help you, if you have thoughts, questions, future podcast topics, or if you're on this journey too and would like support with understanding how it can map to you in a better way, or to your team or to your organization, do get in touch. Info@next-action.co.uk. Again, the website next-action.co.uk. Check us out. We're doing lots of good things every day to try and bring this, or to bring this rather, to people's lives in a meaningful way. But for now, from me, from Todd, thanks for tuning in. Be sure to like and subscribe if you're getting this in one of those formats that allows that, so you can get more of this kind of thinking coming your way regularly. Hope this was useful to you. We'll see you next time.